So, in this chapter, we are discussing how Torah is within all the ways of serving God, beyond, 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 meaning we're grouping everything as the commandments, the mitzvahs, and they're all amazing. They're all unbelievable. They all give us an intimate connection. And then there's something beyond all that called Torah. And we started off the chapter by saying what's unique about Torah is that with Torah, we have a double embrace. Meaning with a regular commandment, as I do the commandment, I am surrounded by it. That happens with every commandment, including Torah. What's unique about Torah is not only am I surrounded by it, but I surround it at the same time. Meaning when I give charity, right? My hand puts the coin in the box or writes the check. My hand is surrounded by the energy of God's will. My hand is right now an extension of God's will. My hand is within God's will, but God's will is not within my hand. So I'm surrounded by it, but it is not within me, within this limb, which could imply perhaps that I could do the commandment, but not be ultimately changed by it. I'm within it, which obviously is an impact, but it's not within me. When I learn Torah, both are happening. That's what we said, the unbelievable double embrace that only happens in Torah. I'm completely surrounded by it, as happens with every commandment, and it's completely within me. And that additional dimension means Torah's inside of me. Torah's changing me. I'm so one with God. Not only am I within Him, He's within me. And this creates what the Alter Rebbe calls the Yichud Nifla, the wondrous union only achievable by Torah, because only in Torah, not only are you within God's reality, God is within yours. And this is so wondrous because it's absolute. It's a simultaneous, complete immersion, one in the other and one in the other, which we can't even say doesn't happen in any dimension in the physical reality. And we're talking about infinity and finite fusing as one. And all of that, which I called, if you will, the first half of the chapter, the first advantage, which is intellectual process, my mind containing and being contained by the thoughts of God, naturally flows to the second half of the chapter when we spoke of the spiritual advantage. Meaning, when I am containing and being contained by, it's talking about my mind. This wondrous union is, in a sense, my mind, one with the thoughts of God. But from that flows the spiritual difference between Torah and the commandments for the same reason. By the commandments, the hand is surrounded by God's will, is within God's will, is an extension of God's will, but God's will isn't inside my hand. So therefore, spiritually speaking, mirroring this, the energy of God drawn down by the commandment surrounds my soul, is the garment of my soul, as God's energy surrounds my hand. But Torah, I take it inside of me as well. And therefore, spiritually, Torah is food. It's the only thing that feeds the soul. You could do commandments all day, all night. Your soul could be starving, weak, languishing as you're leading a religious life and doing commandments day and night because the soul's not getting any food. Nothing's getting inside of it because the only thing that gets inside of us is Torah. Just again, when I'm learning intellectually, my mind not only is within God's thoughts are in my mind. And therefore, spiritually, the energy of the Torah is within the soul, is feeding the soul. And that's really how this whole chapter is really one flow. The intellectual advantage and uniqueness of Torah, which flows into and directly is parallel, the spiritual advantage and uniqueness of Torah. We said later, chapter 23, we'll discuss other advantages. Chapter 37, we'll discuss other advantages. These three chapters are the main ones that really focus on the wow, what Torah uniquely, amazingly accomplishes. But we don't have to get past chapter 5. Like, this is feeding my soul, and it's the only thing that feeds my soul. So that is a very significant, serious reason to study Torah. Now, the last point we were up to, the Rebbe gave a little caveat. The Rebbe said the Torah has to be studied lishma, for her sake. Now, again, in the beginning of the chapter, when we spoke of how the mind contains and is contained by, right, the intellectual process, my mind within the thoughts of God and God's thoughts within my mind, we also gave a caveat. We said this only works if you're understanding. If you, as we say, daven, you're learning. If you're reading it somewhat mindfully, because somehow you get to the end of the page, but somewhat mindlessly, because you have no clue what you read on the page or how you got to the end of the page, or you sort of have a bit of a fuzzy clue, but not much. That Torah was not the double embrace. Your mind has to be containing and contained by. You have to completely understand it and completely be focused and holding it, gripping it. And if you're not, it doesn't happen. So similarly, just as there was that clause, that condition to make the Torah be the catalyst for this double embrace of your mind and God's thoughts, you have to really understand that Torah. I don't mean like really understand it versus like understand it. I mean, completely understand it. Not like sometimes, we learn things and we sort of, whatever, keep moving, get to the end of the page. I understood, I didn't understand, I'm reading. Torah is not a reading exercise. You have to understand. And when you're understanding, this double embrace happens. But for the Torah to become your food, it needs a spiritual condition. Because lishma, for her sake, is not an intellectual condition. That we had in the beginning of the chapter, with the intellectual mind containing and being contained by. Now it's a spiritual expression. The energy gets in my soul, and therefore there's a spiritual condition. What does lishma mean? Lishma means for her sake. A person could do many services of God and not think about God at all. That's not ideal. It might sound very unfortunate, but it actually is very common. You might view it as 3 levels. There could be one level of automatic pilot, habit, routine, what our sages call mitzvahs anashim milumada, habit, routine. You get up in the morning and you put your hands together, bow your head, and you say your Maida'ani, and you lean down and you wash dagavas, and you and you just keep moving. Or you say, wait, did I make that blessing on the food or not? Did I make that after blessing or not? Did I pray the afternoon prayer or not? Well, I mean, wouldn't you know if you did it or not? Not necessarily. Because you could be doing it so habitually that you really don't know if you did it or not. So that's the first thing of what we're saying here. Lishma, and not habit, routine, automatic, like on pilot mode. No, lishma means focused and concentrated. Lishma also means, and not lishma. Again, lishma means for her sake. So not lishma will be not for her sake. So what's Torah study not for her sake? Well, if you're studying Torah for a different reason. Well, why else would you say Torah except that this is God's will? Maybe it's good for you, advantageous for you to study Torah. Maybe you want to impress someone, and if you seem very knowledgeable in Torah, you will impress someone, and that's important for you to advance your career or whatever. You are not doing it for Torah. You're not doing it for God. You're doing it for a certain personal gain. If a student is studying Torah to pass a test, she's not thinking about God. She's thinking about she has to pass the test. So it's her gain. It's not Torah's. It's not for the sake of Torah. It's not for the sake of God. And then, of course, there'd be something far worse, which is studying Torah for negative reasons, like studying Torah to discredit Torah, God forbid, to question and to try to discredit Torah. So all of these will be the absence of lishma. Lishma and not automatic pilot. Lishma and not for your personal gain. Lishma and not, God forbid, for negative reasons. But what is lishma? So lishma means that You're doing something for a God's sake, which means that Lishma is a thought, an intention, but an intention that is an expression of your love for God. So Lishma is a fusion of your emotion and your thoughts. For example, as we're going to read, the lowest level Lishma is to connect to God. I want to connect to God. Through Torah, I'm connecting to God. That's a thought. I want to connect to God. This is how. If one thought those words without feeling the feeling that should be behind those words, it's nothing. It's not Lishma. It's, like a parrot, like a monkey. It's nothing. When one thinks those words organically, naturally flowing from your feeling for God and your desire to connect to Him, then it's Lishma. Now, there are higher levels of Lishma. Lishma could be for the sake of Torah. Lishma could be for the sake of God. Lishma could be to bring God into this world. Lishma could be to bring the redemption. Lishma could be to add the energy of the infinity of God into Torah. There are higher and higher levels, and obviously what makes them higher is they're more and more altruistic. They're not about you. They're about God's will. They're about Torah's benefit. They're for the sake of the Jewish people. They're for the sake of the world. But on some level, there has to be some fire. Love is a fire. There has to be some fire cooking, so to speak, the energy of Torah that you can digest it. So the Torah energy is coming down, and it has constricted itself to get into your soul. But to get into your soul, it needs that fire. It needs to be cooked with the fire of your love for God as expressed in your mind in an overarching thought like, God, this is your will, and I want to connect to you. Which would be the most basic, simple Lishma, because again, there's the I. The more I, the less spiritual, the less holy. But that would be like a pass. This is your will, and I want to connect to your will is like a pass, because there is love, and you do have an intention, and it is a spiritual intention, so you got to pass. And as you grow spiritually, you can be more and more God-centered and less personally centered. All right, so let's read this inside. So we are, as I said, towards the end of chapter 5 on page Yud, 7 lines down, the middle of the line. The last thing we read was about Torah hi hamazon. Torah is the food, l'neshamos, to souls, she'asku b'olam hazeh b'Torah lishma, that were involved in this world and studying Torah lishma, for her sake. Right? That was a quote from the Eitz Chaim, which means it's Kabbalah, it's esoteric dimension. The Eitz Chaim is Reb Chaim Vital recording the teachings of the Arizal. So this is from the teachings of the Arizal, the potential of Torah to be digested by your soul if you're studying it with a spiritual clause of Lishma. And now we're bringing in another source, and additionally, in the Zohar itself, okay, this is the Eitz Chaim, this is Reb Chaim Vital, this is Yarizal. Now we're going back many centuries before to the foundational work of Kabbalah, the Zohar, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, and there he also brings out the same point. So what do you mean by Lishma? Ulishma. Let's understand this condition, because this is very significant. We want to be fed by our Torah study. We don't want to be studying Torah and our soul still languishing because we didn't digest it. Ulishma hainu kedei lekasher nafsho lahavaya al dei hasagas haTorah. And Lishma, and as I said, the Rebbe is giving you here the most minimal Lishma. It's the most minimal because we still have the I factor. I want, but it's a Lishma because it's a God as well. It's a God intention. It's a God love, even though I'm very involved here. Well, Lishma meaning in order to connect my soul to God through grasping the Torah. Ish kefi sichlo, each person according to his grasp. Because as we're saying, the intellectual grasp is what's creating the spiritual food for your soul. as is explained in the Pri Etz Chaim, which again is from the writings of Reb Chaim Vital, recording the teachings of the Arizal. So when we're looking at this, it's very interesting that the Rebbe is giving us like, okay, I'm not going to give you lofty high levels of lishma, of intention, right? Lishma we could translate as intention for God. I'm not giving you the highest, most spiritual levels. I want this to be doable. I want you to do this. I want every single one of you, so to speak, the Alter Rebbe is saying, to close the Tanya and be able to be focused when you learn and have a lishma. Because isn't this what you want? Like, why else would you be studying Torah? Again, are you studying Torah because you have bad intentions and you want to discredit Torah? No. Are you studying Torah for personal gain so people should think more highly of you, or you should get ahead in job or positions in the community? No. Are you studying Torah just because it's your routine? Maybe. Okay, the rabbi says, great, let's stop at this point. Every time before you study, stop and remind yourself why you have this routine. Meaning you have a routine, possibly. Possibly every day before you daven, before you pray, there's some Torah you study. Possibly there's some Torah you study every day after you pray. Possibly there's some Torah you study at night. Possibly there's certain classes you go to. Now, when you originally set up those routines of studying Torah in the morning or in the evening or the middle of the day or on Mondays or Tuesday night Tanya, when you started your routine, surely you had a God reason why you did this. Like there was no other benefit. You're not doing it for anyone to be impressed by you. You're not doing it for anyone to give you anything for it. You're studying Torah because you know God wants you to study Torah. You want to have this relationship with God, and therefore you're studying. So originally, when you started the routine, I'm sure, and the Alter was also sure, you had a God reason. And the God reason was coming from your love for God and desire to connect to him, or something much more lofty than that. It's possible over time, it deteriorated to routine. And in the morning or after prayers or lunchtime or in the evening or before you go to bed or Tuesday night Tanya, whatever it is, it's just your routine. And you might be doing it and forget why. But if you stop and before you start learning, you remind yourself, why am I learning? Why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I want God. I'm doing this because it's God's will. I'm doing this to connect to him. I'm doing this to bring him more into this world. I'm doing this to bring Mashiach. I'm doing it, whatever spiritual reason, which was really the reason you took this on, whenever you took this on, that's why you're doing it. It's still why you're doing it. So when you remind yourself of that, right away, it sinks you into the Lishma. Because surely all of the Torah we study is for the sake of God, is perhaps for the sake of my soul connecting to God, or bringing God more into this world, or bringing godliness down into this world, or elevating this world to God, or bringing redemption. We have a good reason. That was the original reason we began this good routine that maybe now is a good, but I forgot the reason routine. And what we really want to take away from here is it's important to remember. So it's good to just stop every time you study. Before you study, give yourself a little 5-second pause and remind yourself, I'm studying because I love God and I want to give him a hug. That's an intention. I'm studying because this is God's will. That's an intention. I'm studying because I want to be one with God. That's an intention. So the intentions we have, that is why we're doing it. What the Rebbe is saying is we need to be mindful of that. So again, the Lishma comes from our heart and is expressed in our mind. So for whatever reason in our heart, we want that relationship with God. We want to fulfill his will. We want to give him nachas. We want to give him joy. We want to do what he wants and think it as a thought, whatever is that feeling in your heart. And that's Lishma. That's all it takes. And then the Torah you're studying is cooked in the fires of your lishma, the fires of your love as expressed in that thought. And then your Torah study can be food. And as we're saying, is the only food your soul ever gets. So it's worth it to stop, pause, remember why you're doing this, and then study. Actually, much later in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe actually says that if you're studying for many hours, you should stop every hour and reignite your intention, your lishma, the why. But it's every hour. So probably most of us aren't studying for hours straight that we have to remember that. But if you are studying over an hour, the Alter Rebbe says every hour there's a different divine energy formation. And therefore, every hour we want to reconnect to that energy by rethinking the thought of my lishma, of my emotion expressed in a thought of why I'm doing this. God, I love you and I want a relationship with you. God, I love you and I want to connect to you. God, I love you and I want to do your will. God, I love you and I want to bring you down to this world. God, I love you and I want Mashiach. Whatever your thought is, think it and then study.
If somebody learns as a machine, as a robot, what happens?
Well, so the other advantages of the parak happen, but this one does not. Meaning, if a person learns by rote, but completely understands, not by rote and you spaced out. They're learning by rote, but they actually are mentally focused. They're just not emotionally and spiritually focused, but they're mentally focused. So the first two advantages, meaning the first half of the chapter, that your mind contains and is contained by, happens, and therefore the wondrous union happens. But this third critical advantage, that the Torah feeds your soul, does not happen. Cannot happen if there's no conscious lishma. That's why it's so important. And as I'm saying, it's so doable because the Rebbe is not asking for lofty levels of intention. There are many lofty levels of intention. The Rebbe is not asking for that. And that's why the Rebbe gave a very, very basic lishma, very self-centered lishma, because it's very doable. Why are we learning Torah? I want a relationship with you, God. I love you, God. I want to do what you want. I love you, God. I want to bring you in this world. That's why we're doing it. I love you, God. I want you more in my life. Fine. That's a lishma. It's an intention. It's an expression of my love. It's an expression that there's a spiritual dimension that has to be there for the Torah to become food for our soul. So a person learns all day long and they're focused and intellectually they're getting it, but they don't have this spiritual overlay. The food is not digested. It's not feeding their soul, unfortunately. So we are now at the final thought of the chapter. That's so exciting. We are finishing tonight. If you're looking inside, the final thought is in parentheses, which of course means it's parenthetical. Now, it's not a side note, right? We have what we call a haggah, a side note, which is really parenthetical, which is usually answering a skeptic's question, bringing in some deeper Kabbalistic note that's not really the domain of Tanya. So this is not a side note. It is part of the body of the text, but it's in parentheses. It's parenthetical because, in a sense, we finished the chapter. The purpose of the chapter was very clear. We want to be inspired to study Torah. We want to know how Torah is beyond every commandment and energizes our whole service, which it does. We're here to transform the world. The more Torah we study, the more we have the energy to transform the world. We're here to give this world to God. We're here to bring the redemption. We're here to bring God into this world. But the more Torah we study, the more our soul has the power to do all that. So the Alter Rebbe really wants us to study Torah. And this chapter, as I said, is one of three that really, really focus on how special. Chapter 23 and 37 are not only exclusively devoted to this topic. They do have other things going on. Chapter 5 is from beginning to end only talking about how special Torah is. So we're done, but we're not because there's a parentheses. What's a parentheses? Well, the parentheses is a question a skeptic or a person wondering could have. You don't have to be a skeptic. You just be a wondering person, a thinking person. And you could say, wait a minute, Alter Rebbe, you are teaching us how Torah has an advantage, a supremacy, a superiority over all the commandments. Check. And part of doing so is by saying that Torah is the only food for our soul, as versus the commandments where the energy surrounds the soul in his garments. Check. The person says, well, that seems to imply that the commandments are actually higher than Torah. Because let's understand this idea of this energy, right? When one studies Torah or when one does a commandment, energy comes down to your soul. The commandment's energy can't get in your soul. It's surrounding your soul. Torah's energy can get in your soul. So why would the energy of the commandments not be able to get in your soul? So the reason is it's called, and Kabbalistically, there's a term we use, makifim. Use this term both in Kabbalah and Hasidus. Makifim means encompassing energies. Why is something an encompassing energy and not an inside energy? Because it's too powerful to get in. So if mitzvahs produce an energy that's encompassing, surrounds your soul, is a garment for your soul, that means it's too powerful to get in your soul. And if Torah draws down an energy that gets in your soul, that means it's a smaller energy because it's small enough to get in. And the mitzvah's energy is too powerful to get in. So that seems to imply that maybe this very fact is proving the specialness of mitzvahs over Torah. So that's a decent question, right? That's not just a skeptic trying to, that's a very logical question. So there are answers set now. And this is the final concepts in the chapter. So looking inside the parentheses. V'hamazon hi bechinas or pnimi. When we're saying something is food, in this case, of course, Torah's energy becomes food, that means it's an inner light, which means it's a constricted light because it's small enough to get in. V'alavushim bechinas makifim. And the commandments are producing an energy which is considered garments because they're encompassing. They're too powerful to get in. So again, if we were trying to chart this out, we could say mitzvahs, the commandments, produce an energy that's advantageously so powerful. That's why it's encompassing. On the downside, obviously, there's a more inner effect if it gets in. But on the upside, it's very powerful. If it's too powerful to get in, if it's too big to get in, as versus Torah, which draws down an energy that's digested by the soul, which on the upside means it's impacting much more, but on the downside, it's clearly not as powerful if it could get in. So that's what we're saying here. Well, on one hand, yeah, we're saying, hey, Torah is the only food. Torah is the only thing that gets in. Torah has this inner impact. That's all very positive for Torah. But on the other hand, if the mitzvahs can't get in, that light can't get in, it means it's much more powerful. So that's implying mitzvahs have something special over Torah. So how does the Rebbe answer this very good question? So the Rebbe says, you're right. And we have an actually saying of our sages that responds to this. And therefore our sages said, Shetam Torah shakol keneged kol hamitzvos. Okay, this is a famous saying of the sages. The study of Torah is equivalent to all the commandments. Now, that saying has many dimensions. How is the Alter Rebbe explaining it here to answer our question? Lefisha mitzvos hein levushim levad. Because mitzvos only produce godliness, which is a garment. Torah hi mazon v'gam levush. Torah actually has two levels of energy. The unique special energy of Torah is the food that could get digested when you're learning Lishma for the sake of God. But it also has energy, which is a garment. L'nefesh hamaskela shemislabesh ba b'yuna v'limudah. For the soul of the person who's intellectually using his faculties to study well the Torah, his soul not only is being fed by Torah, but Torah's energy is also encompassing his soul. So we had here a good question, right? Our good question was, wait, is Torah weaker because it's food? And the Rebbe's answer was a saying of our sages. Talmud Torah shakol keneged kol mitzvos. The study of Torah is equivalent to all the commandments, meaning Torah does both. Yes, Torah has this unique advantage, which might imply a weaker light that it gets in, but it's advantageous because it affects us and feeds us. But don't worry, she's not weak. because Torah also has another light that she draws down, which, like all the commandments, surrounds our soul. So don't worry. Torah has all the advantages of mitzvahs. She has a light too powerful to get in because Torah is a mitzvah. And Torah has her own unique light, the food, weaker, but feeds us. So this point, oh, right, Torah is a mitzvah. So if Torah is a mitzvah, it's a commandment to learn Torah. So as a commandment, like every commandment, she engenders a light that's too powerful to get in. And uniquely as Torah, she also draws down a light that does get in and feeds us, which of course is so necessary, essential for our soul. We all need to be fed, including our soul. Great, we're done. Well, if you look inside, we're not done yet. We still got a little more to read. Why? Because the person could continue wondering and says, okay. So Torah does both. Torah does both. Well, if she does both, she probably doesn't do either so well. If you can envision, like, I don't know, if you have a camera that is takes still pictures and is a vlogging camera as well. Well, it probably is not amazing at either because it has both capacities. If it was only vlogging, if it was only still pictures, then that would be its forte and it would be very, very strong. But if it's doing two things, it probably does both okay. So Torah draws down godliness to feed our soul. And as a commandment, like every commandment, draws down godliness to surround our souls. So she's probably doing that okay because she's doing two things. So you can't do either one so amazingly. So the Rebbe says, no, you're wrong. How can I say you're wrong? Because actually, Torah, obviously we understand as food, she's amazing and unique, and there's no competition. But in terms of drawing down energy that's a garment for our soul, potentially Torah does that better than any other commandment. Like you're thinking she's not doing it as well because she's like, we would say, spreading herself thin and doing two things at once. Torah says, no. Don't think of it like that. Don't try to make it like a human being that can't do two things at once. Torah does both and does both better than anything else. So how do we know that Torah's garment is better than any other garment? So the Rebbe says, because we know, what does it say? V'kol shekain, how much more so? Kishem moitzi b'piv b'dibor. When the person learning Torah is articulating the words. Now, as we already learned in this chapter, you have to articulate the words when you say Torah. The only time you are exempt from saying the words is if you're in deep concentration, or I guess if you're in a class. But if you're learning Torah otherwise, like if you are learning anything, you're learning Chumash, you're learning Tanya, you're learning a Sicha, you're learning a piece of Gemara, whatever you're learning a Midrash, you have to say it out loud. That's part of your obligation learning Torah. When you say it out loud, shehevel hadibor nase bechinas or makif k'moshakasav priyetz chaim, that energy from that breath of speech becomes a more encompassing light than the regular encompassing light of the commandments, as is written in the Priyetz Chaim. So what the Rebbe is adding at the end of our parenthetical point is, again, remembering the flow. Our first question was, well, maybe mitzvahs have an advantage over Torah because their light is too powerful to get in. No, Torah does both. Torah's light get in, and Torah has a light that surrounds. So commandments light isn't more powerful because Torah does that too. Oh, well, if Torah is doing two things for the price of one, probably she's not doing it so well. No, she's doing it actually better than mitzvahs, better than the commandments. How can we say better? Because the Rebbe says that when you are learning Torah and saying the words out loud, this only happens if you say the words out loud, a very special encompassing light is formed. What's so special about this encompassing light? There are levels of encompassing. And the two levels that we normally call in very broad strokes are what's called, in the Hebrew, we say makiv hakarov, makiv harachok, which means a more intimate encompassing light and a more vast and distant encompassing light. The example given is your clothing encompass you and your home, the room you're in encompasses you, right? Your clothing are surrounding you and you're in a room that's surrounding you. But the difference between the two is very obvious. Your clothing, because it's very close to you, changes as per the wearer. You gain some weight, you lost some weight, someone else is wearing it. It's going to look different because it's encompassing, but it still has an intimate relationship to what it is encompassing, to the wearer, to you. And therefore, it shifts as per the wearer. But the room, the house, is not affected by you. More people come in the room, less people come in the room. The walls don't bulge, the walls don't shrink. They're too big, too far, too vastly remote from the people inside to be affected by them. So normally, when we learn Torah, the energy drawn down, like with all mitzvahs, is a makif, an encompassing energy that's close to the wearer, that's close to the soul. So it's affected by the parameters of the soul. That's true for Torah, and it's true for all commandments. Every commandment, including Torah, the energy drawn down is makif, it is encompassing, it is too powerful to get in, but it's a close encompassing, like clothing. It's close, meaning small enough to be affected by what it's surrounding. But when one does it right, because this is how you're supposed to do it, and when you say the words of Torah out loud as you are learning, which I could say personally is a big challenge for me. It's a challenge because that's not how we're trained to study, so it's hard for us. But when we do it like we're supposed to, and we say those words out loud, a special encompassing energy forms around the soul. What makes it special? It's not like all the others. It's not a close encompassing affected by the parameters of the soul. It's a far, remote encompassing, too big to be affected by that which it is surrounding. So it's like, whoa, the ultimate encompassing energy. And what draws that down? Which commandment? Torah, when you say the words out loud. So why is this the final point? Because the Rebbe now proved that it's not that the commandment is better because it's surrounding. Torah also surrounds. And it's not that, yeah, it surrounds, so it's probably a weak surrounding. No, actually, when you study the Torah out loud, it's a stronger surrounding energy than any possible commandment can ever produce. So with that, we conclude the chapter. And the bottom line of this chapter is very clear. This is very, very straight, very obvious. You right there, so understandable. These are not deep, difficult, mind-bending ideas. These are very simple, very straight. Learn Torah that your mind understands the Torah you're learning, and learn Torah remembering your love for God as your reason why you're learning. And when you do it that way, you have the double grasping that's unique to Torah. You have the absolute union that's unique to Torah. And you have the Torah feeding your soul, so essential that your soul gets fed, unique to Torah. So again, we have to learn and we have to understand what we're learning. You could say, well, I don't always understand my chitas. Okay, so do chitas for other reasons, because that's what the Rebbe wants. But learn something you understand as well. And remember, at least in the beginning, if as you're learning it would distract you, that's okay. But when you start off the learning, remind yourself why you are learning. I love you, God. I want to connect to you.